All right, all right. So we're gonna get into some of the things that you said with the prosecutor. We're gonna get through some of the things that you said, but we're gonna start back from the top. There's a lot to be discussed. There is a lot that has been said today. So we're going to start from the very top. So if you could, please explain to us, what is your, how long have you been a police officer? And what type of work did you do before becoming a police officer? All right, and you're certified through T-Code, correct? And can you explain what T-Code is? So T-Code trains you and it provides the education for you as a police officer, correct? So everything that you know about being a police officer came from T-Code, correct? And the way that you learn to enforce the law came from T-Code, correct? And your all of your training and your strategy came from T-Code, correct? So in your T-Code training, and I've seen the manual, I've seen the course structure, I've seen the requirements for graduation or for certification, and I've seen the levels of proficiency. What level of T-Code are you? There's 4 levels of performance. What level of performance are you in T-Code currently? You're at the highest level. Okay. And can you explain to the court what the T-Code levels are? So there's beginner, there's intermediate, there's advanced, and then there's mastery, correct? So you're saying in T-Code, you're at the mastery level. Okay. So you're familiar with the car and the accident T-Code procedures, correct? And it discusses with you how you're supposed to work car accidents, correct? Okay. And then they also talk to you about the Texas Constitution, correct? And they also train you on the U.S. Constitution. And they train you on the Fourth Amendment, correct? Now, when they train you on these things, this is under the arrest and seizure part of the course material, correct? And one of the things that they really put emphasis on is the Fourth Amendment. Is that correct? So could you share with us what the Fourth Amendment is? All right. And in the T-Code, in the T-Code training, they also introduced to you guys certain court cases. Is that correct? And I believe in teaching you the U.S. Constitution, they taught you the case Terry versus Ohio, correct? Now, in T-Code training, did they teach you the Terry frisk or the Terry stop? Did they teach you that in T-Code training? Okay, so you're familiar with the Terry frisk and the Terry stop through T-Code, correct? Okay, and so you're aware that the Terry frisk came from the Terry versus Ohio court case. Oh, you didn't know that? Okay, so we're gonna pull up the T code training so that we can review that material, because yes, it did come from that court case, but I want to show you that this came from the court case, and the court case is in your T code training. So we're going to open that court case real quick. Okay, so as you can see in this court case, there was a traffic stop, and in that traffic stop, that led to a search, correct? So after the ruling in this case, other people started calling it the Terry frisk or the Terry stop, correct? Does that make sense? Okay, so that makes sense. The best way I can explain it is kind of like sports. Do you know who Tom Brady is? And do you remember the game against the Raiders where he fumbled, and then the referees came together and they made a decision, and then every point after that they started calling Tom Brady's behavior the tuck rule. They said it wasn't a fumble because he tried to tuck the ball. And so after every moment after that, they evaluated through the tuck rule. So you remember that rule, right? So that's essentially how the U.S. court system works. And that's a beautiful example of how the court systems work with the police, correct? The police are like the referees. You guys enforce the rules. But sometimes the judges come together and the judges create a rule, or they interpret a rule. And then when that judge interprets that rule, then every referee after that, every police officer has to follow the new rule that the judge created. That makes sense? So you have experience with this behavior, correct? Have you ever seen a law changed in your career as a police officer? And have you ever seen a law changed by like a politician in your career as a police officer? And have you ever seen a law changed by a judge in your career as a police officer? So can you give one example of when a law was changed by a politician that you saw in your career? What about when the gun laws were changed? So you began your career in Midland Police, correct? What about because you remember early in Texas, it used to be required to have a license to carry if you owned a weapon. You remember that? And then in 2021, that rule was changed, correct? And in 2021, the bill that was passed no longer made it required for you to have a license to carry, correct? And that law was changed by politicians, correct? So that would be an example of a law changed by politicians. So in 2021, a person is now allowed to carry a firearm with no firearm license. That's correct. So that means that a person could have their firearm on them without a license. That's correct. And so naturally the next set of questions would be, okay, well, what are the rules for carrying your license with no weapon? Well, part of that is that the weapon has to be concealed, correct? And just so we're on the same page, what does concealed mean? Mr. Standage, Stephen, if you could tell the court, what does concealed mean? Concealed means that you cannot see the weapon, correct? Concealed means it's out of plain sight, correct? So in theory, let's use some examples. So if a person has a weapon in a backpack, would that weapon be concealed or not concealed? So that would be concealed. If we're talking about a regular backpack and you can't see in the backpack, technically that's concealed. So that's a legal way to carry a weapon. What if the weapon was in a purse? Can you see a weapon through a purse? You can't see a weapon through the purse. So that would be concealed. What if a person had on a coat and they had on a large coat with large pockets? Can you see a weapon through a coat? Now, if we're going to talk about a jacket, you may be able to see the print through a jacket. And so before we ask the coat question, I'll ask you, if you can see the print of a weapon, is that weapon still concealed? And you have your answer. I believe your answer is incorrect, but let's say that you're correct. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and we'll assume that your answer is correct. That if you can see the print of the gun, that's just like the gun being on display. So if something is sticking out of somebody's jacket or it looks like a gun, is that the same thing as brandishing a gun? We'll give you the benefit of the doubt on that. But let's talk about a coat and a jacket that you cannot see the print. Let's talk about that type of coat. In a big coat with big pockets and a gun that you cannot see, is that person legally carrying a weapon? Is that weapon concealed? It is concealed. So technically, a person can walk around with a weapon in their coat and be following the law, correct? Okay. So now we understand the concealed carry laws, and we understand what it means to carry a concealed weapon. Okay. So let's get back to what we were talking about. So that's an example of a politician changing a law. So can you give us an example of when a judge has changed the law? So an example of a judge changing a law would be segregation, correct? Remember back in the 1950s and 1960s, there were a lot of racism in the United States. And do you remember how there used to be signs up that would say coloreds only or whites only? You remember that? And do you remember how that behavior was changed? Do you remember how that behavior was removed? It was through judges. Do you remember what court case specifically made that type of behavior illegal? It was a court case called Brown versus the Board of Education. And in this court case, Supreme Court judges, which is the highest court in the land, correct? They told the Board of Education that it was illegal to segregate classrooms based on race, correct? And from that court case, that began to affect every other area of life, because then the way that the judges interpreted the case, the general population understood it as, well, if you can't segregate in school, you can't segregate anywhere, correct? So after that court case was decided on, then segregating in restaurants became illegal, segregating at gyms became illegal, segregating at water fountains became illegal, segregating in libraries became illegal, on and on and on and on, correct? So essentially, what we saw in the courtroom was a case involving a school, correct? But that court case went on to affect the whole entire country, correct? So it started only with a school, but it ended up changing the law for the entire country, every building in the country, correct? So that court case shows how judges can change the law, correct? So now we're familiar with how judges impact the law, correct? We're knowledgeable on how politicians affect the law, correct? And we're knowledgeable about how police have to respond to these changes, correct? Okay, so now that we understand that, now we can come back to the case, because I believe we have an adequate understanding of your training, what your exposure is to the law, and how you understand that the law can be changed. Okay, so in your T code training, you said that you had been trained on the Fourth Amendment, correct? So can you explain to me what conditions? Now, my first question is to you: can you go up to somebody and arrest them for no reason? In order to arrest someone, can you tell me what conditions have to be present? There has to be some element of crime, correct? You have to suspect that they were in a crime. You had to have seen them commit a crime. You had to have believed that they would commit a crime, or they have to be behaving in a dangerous way that would then mean that your safety was in danger, correct? Or you believe that they were about to be a danger to someone else, correct? So those would be the things that would have to happen. Now, specifically when we talk about the danger element of how you're able to arrest somebody, that's essentially assuming that you believe that they would be violent with someone, correct? You're assuming that they would either be violent with you, or you're assuming they're about to go be violent with someone else, correct? That would be the main idea behind arresting somebody and labeling them as dangerous, correct? That label of them being dangerous is a belief that they're going to be violent with someone, correct? Now, police have this thing called armed and dangerous, correct? And if someone is armed and dangerous, that gives you the right to search them, correct? That also gives you the right to detain them, correct? And it gives you the right to arrest them. But my question is being armed a crime? So we've already discussed that being armed is not a crime. And do we know, in Texas, we know the bill that allows you to carry a weapon concealed, correct? Do we know the law? Do you know the law that allows you to carry a firearm, period? That would be the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, correct? So, and you've been trained on the Second Amendment, correct? That's a part of your T code training. Okay, so now we know that carrying firearms is legal. And in Texas specifically, you can carry a concealed weapon with no license, correct? So being armed is not a crime, correct? Now, when you're armed, your weapon can have ammunition in the weapon, correct? When you have a firearm, you're expected to have ammunition in the weapon, correct? If you say you were in a self-defense incident and you had to draw your weapon and it had no ammo in it, that would defeat the purpose of having the weapon, wouldn't it? You're expected to have ammo in the weapon. So is having ammo in a weapon a crime? So that's not a crime. And having your weapon also is not a crime. So these are legally protected freedoms, correct? When a person has a concealed weapon on them in the state of Texas, that is their legally protected freedom. Is that correct? So the only way you could then detain a legally armed person is if you believe them to be dangerous. Is that correct? And if you believe them to be dangerous, what you're saying is you believe that they would either harm you or they would harm another person, correct? So what type of behavior would you expect to see in a person that you believed would likely harm another person? Would you expect to see anger? What about a raised voice? Would you expect to see somebody raising their voice? What about clenched fists? Would you expect to see somebody's fists clenched? What about large aggressive motions? Would you expect to see like big over the top behaviors? What about heavy breathing? Would you expect to see heavy breathing? Have you ever seen an angry person and said to yourself, "Oh, it looks like that person's about to get into a fight"? Have you ever seen that? Do you know what that image looks like? Is that about how you would expect a person that was about to engage in violence to look? Okay. What about if a person is quiet? Does that look like danger? What about if a person had their hands in their pockets and they're standing still? Does that look dangerous? What about if a person puts their head down and they're standing still? Does that look dangerous? Okay, so none of these behaviors are dangerous. What if a person is looking into the distance and just staring in the sky? Does that look dangerous? Is that a dangerous behavior? What about if you talk to a person and they don't make eye contact with you? Is that dangerous? Does that look dangerous? Okay, so none of these behaviors are dangerous and none of these behaviors look dangerous, correct? Okay, so those are the four conditions that are present and that are needed in order to arrest someone, correct? Okay, so in your T code training, remember, and we're going to pull up some of the material. So there's the coursework, and there's specifically the Fourth Amendment, correct? That's expected to be covered in T code. We talked about that. And then there it says you're expected to know the Fourth Amendment, correct? And so now that we've seen what it looks like in the T code coursework, we're going to examine the Fourth Amendment more closely. All right, could you read this for me? So the Fourth Amendment says that citizens are protected against unreasonable searches and seizures, correct? So can you explain to us what a search is? Okay, so a search is when a police officer begins to make body contact with someone and they're searching that person for items. It's when a police officer begins to make body contact and closely examine a person's possessions. When they begin to make body contact and they begin to closely watch a person's clothes, a person's anything that they have with them, that would be a search, correct? We know what search is. So it's when police is making body contact and they're physically looking at someone and they're looking for things. They're searching for things. They're closely watching someone and looking at all of their personal belongings. Correct? That's a search. So what about this word seizure? Do you know what seizure means? Okay, so we'll look at this word seizure. So we'll go back to our case of Terry versus Ohio. Okay. And I gotta see if seizure is defined in Terry versus Ohio, because I learned it in Torres versus Madrid. So I got to see if it's defined in there. But as you can see, a seizure is any time a member of government makes body contact with another person that temporarily stops their freedom. So, correct? All right, so what we'll do is we'll substitute government with police officer. So it's anytime a police officer makes body contact with somebody that temporarily stops their freedom. So as a police officer, if you grab someone's arm, have you temporarily stopped their freedom? If they pull their arm away from you and run, they have now committed a crime, correct? So anytime a police officer makes body contact with someone, they have temporarily stopped their freedom. So that's considered a seizure. So anytime a police officer makes body contact, that person is expected to give you their attention, correct? They're expected to turn around and see what you're saying. If you make body contact with someone and someone shrugs you off like this, they've technically committed a crime, correct? You've physically tried to get their attention and they've ignored you. That's technically a crime, right? So when a police officer makes body contact with somebody, you have temporarily stopped their freedom. They're no longer allowed to be free. They can't run away from you. They can't get in their car and speed off. They can't keep talking to their friend. They can't keep looking through their cell phone. They can't keep searching through their backpack. When you make body contact with a citizen, they're expected to turn their attention to you, correct? Okay, so that means that anytime a police officer makes body contact, that is considered a seizure. Now, you can seize a cell phone, correct? You can take somebody's cell phone from them, correct? However, when you make body contact with a person, you have now taken away their freedom, correct? You may take away their freedom for only 3 minutes. It may be 30 minutes. But if you make body contact with someone, you have taken away their freedom, correct? For a small amount of time, you have taken away their freedom. So the Fourth Amendment says that our citizens are protected against unreasonable searches, correct? And the Fourth Amendment says that citizens are protected against unreasonable seizures, correct? So another way that this can be read is that citizens are protected against unreasonable forms of body contact, correct? So that's what the Fourth Amendment protects you against. It protects citizens from just being grabbed by police with no reason, correct? So as we discussed earlier, in order to make an arrest, there has to be some element of crime. Is that correct? So in order for you to seize somebody, there has to be an element of crime, correct? And for you to make body contact with someone, there has to be some element of crime, correct? You can't just go around making body contact with people with no crime, correct? Okay, so now that we have this foundation and we have this understood, we're going to come back to this, because in this case, there was some body contact made, correct? And in this case, there was an arrest made, correct? So we're going to come back to that. So we're going to go back and we're going to come back and bring it back to training. Like I said, there's a bunch of information in this case. A lot of things have happened. We're going to come back. Right now, we're going to stick to the training and make sure that we understand the foundation, correct? I like to think about life like building a house, correct? When you build a house, it would be smart to start from the ground up, correct? So we're going to stick with this ideal of training. So in your career, in T-Code, they also trained you on how to work accidents, correct? Can you tell me what is the procedure for working a car accident? Okay, so in a car accident, you're expected to ask for ID, correct? And you're expected to call in the ID, correct? And you're expected to ask for insurance, correct? And you're expected to ask for a statement of how the accident occurred, correct? And you're expected to write down that statement of what occurred, correct? And then you're expected to speak with both drivers from the accident, correct? Both drivers are supposed to be interviewed about what happened, correct? And then you're expected to compare the stories from both drivers, correct? And you're expected to determine, based on the stories you heard, which one sounds more likely, correct? And in those stories, you're supposed to look at the cars and see which story makes the most sense, correct? Those are the steps of the accident. Now, before you came to court today, did you have a chance to watch your own body cam? You did? And what about any other officers? Did you have an opportunity to watch their body cams? You didn't? Okay. But when you were at the car accident, were you the only police officer that was there? You were not. There were other officers there, correct? And you were with one driver, and the other officers were with the other driver, correct? So, according to TCO, in that situation, you were expected to get in a group with the other officers and discuss how the accident occurred, correct? Okay. And so in that group meeting, you guys would have discussed the details of the accident, and then you would have came up with a story that you believe was most reasonable, correct? The story that you believe was most true, that's the story you guys would have agreed upon, correct? And y'all would have made that decision as a group. Is that correct? Okay. So after you guys would have come together and made your story as a group, TCO says that you would then file a report, correct? And since you guys were a group, technically there should be more. When the paperwork is signed, every police officer that participated in making that decision should have signed their name, correct? Or if there's a lead investigator, maybe only the lead investigator would put their name on there. But your input, the officer that assisted, their name would be somewhere on there as well. Is that correct? Okay. So, seeing that this was supposed to occur in a group, I'm going to show you body cam footage from the police officers on the other side. And we're going to look at what they did when they worked the car accident. Okay, so here we have Justin, and he called in the ID for his car accident. He asked for ID, and he called the ID in. On your side of the accident, did you ask for ID? You did. Did you call the ID in? You didn't. Okay, so we've identified one part of TCO that you didn't follow, correct? Okay, let's keep going. Over here, Justin asks if she has insurance. Justin asks if she has insurance. Before I was arrested, did you ask if I had insurance? Okay, you didn't ask. Was there an opportunity for you to ask if I had insurance? Did you ask me if I had been to the grocery store? Did you ask me where I was headed? You did. So instead of asking me where I was headed, could you have asked me for my insurance? So it was possible for you to ask for my insurance. Did you ask for my ID? You did. After asking for my ID, could you have asked for my insurance? You could have. Okay. So there was an opportunity for you to ask for my insurance. So did you ask for my insurance before I was arrested? You didn't. Okay. So we found two things in T code that you did not do. Now, did the other officer ever call over to you and ask if I had insurance? Okay, so there's a moment on video where you call into your radio and you said negative. Do you remember that moment? Can you explain to the court what you were saying negative to? Do you remember? Okay, so I'm going to show you the clip from Justin's body cam. And we're going to take a look at the clip. So as you can see, the question that Justin is asking is, does the person have insurance over there? That's the question he just asked you. And when you heard that question, the next thing that comes through Justin's microphone is negative. So that shows that you were answering Justin's question. In that moment, Justin was asking you for insurance. And you just answered to me that he never asked you, did I have insurance? That's what you just told the court. In this video, we can see that Justin did ask you if I had insurance. So I'll ask you again. Did Justin ask you if I had insurance before I was arrested? So he asked you if I had insurance, and you still did not check to see if I had insurance, correct? Okay, so we'll get to what that possibly means. We'll ask questions about why you didn't ask for insurance. We'll get into that a little later. We're still working our way up. We're going to start from the bottom, and then we're going to work our way to the crescendo. We're going to work our way to the climax. We're going to start at the bottom though, from the basics. So you were asked for insurance, but you did not ask me for insurance, correct? Okay. So we know that you were asked if I had insurance and you were non-responsive, or you were asked if I had insurance and you responded no. You said negative. That's the same thing as responding no, correct? You told him immediately no. No, he does not have insurance. That's what you said. At that point, had you asked me, did I have insurance? So you didn't ask me if I had insurance. Okay. Before I was arrested, at that point, you had not asked me if I had insurance, correct? Okay. So we found two things, according to T code, that you did not do for working a car accident. Okay. Now, during the process of working that car accident, were you waiting on another officer to show up? We're talking about before the arrest. Were you waiting for another officer to show up? You were. And when you asked, did you ask Mr. Liddell to step towards your police car? You did. Okay. Now, is that a normal part of the car accident process? So when we watch Justin's video, he asked her for her ID, correct? And he also asked for her insurance. And then he went to his car and he called them in, correct? But in your video, now when he asked those questions, did he ask Gloria, can you step over here to my police car? Is that what he asked Gloria? He didn't ask Gloria that question, did he? But when you asked me for my ID, you asked me to step over to the police car, didn't you? Okay, so that's not normally a question that's asked. So we're going to assume that you were asking that for your safety. Would that be a safe idea to say? Because you were the only officer over there, it was a bit safer for you to ask me to come to your car until the second officer arrived to help you. Would that be fair to say? And it would be safer to wait for a second officer to come before you left me out there by myself while you were in the car calling something in. Would that be safe to say? You were trying to make sure you play it safe? Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Now, when you first arrived by yourself, correct? And when you first arrived, I was also out there by myself, correct? Did I leave the scene before you got there? Okay. What about when you arrived? Did I leave the scene? Okay. So you wanted to make sure that I wouldn't leave the scene, but I never left the scene to begin with. Is that correct? So if I have $100 and I put it on the table and I go home and I go away from 8 hours and I come back, I would still expect that $100 to be on the table, correct? If I live in a house by myself, do I have to worry about that $100 being missing? So if you're dealing with a person that never left the scene, does it make a lot of sense to be worried about that person leaving the scene? But that's, that's your decision. You're allowed to make your own decisions, correct? Okay, so the reason you didn't get in your car and call the ID in and allow me to wait by the car is because you didn't want to leave me out there by myself for safety reasons, correct? It just felt like a safer decision for you to constantly be watching me. It was better for you to constantly watch me rather than actually do what you were supposed to be doing, correct? So, safe to say, you would have felt more comfortable with a second officer out there with you, correct? So, the entire time you were expecting another officer to come, correct? Now, in your opinion, does this sound like good information to share with the person that you're with? So when you were at the accident scene, you were out there and I were out there, correct? So there were two people out there, correct? Do you believe that was good information to share with me? The fact that you were waiting on another officer to show up, does that sound like good information you should have shared with me? So when I was out there, I asked you, do you know how long this would take? Correct? And I asked you that question 2 times, correct? And when I asked you those questions, in your mind, you knew that another police officer was on the way, correct? Now, during that time, did I know that another police officer was on the way? Did I have access to that information? I did not. What information did I have? I knew that there were 2 police officers across the street helping another woman. And then I saw there was you that was here working my side of the car accident, correct? So at that point in time, I only had knowledge of 3 police officers, correct? Did you believe it was a good idea to let me know another police officer was on the way? Now, if you had told me that another police officer was on the way, do you think that would have benefited me? Do you think that information would have helped me? Do you think that information would have helped me be more patient? Because, so I'll give you a mock conversation. If you said to me, when I asked that question, do you know how long this will take? And you responded, oh, it shouldn't be that long. There's another officer that's on the way, and soon as he get here, we're gonna get your insurance, and then we're gonna call over and things like that. But I'm just waiting on my other officer to get here. Do you think that would have helped me better understand the process? Do you think that information would have been helpful? So how did you respond in real life? When I asked you, how long do you think this will take? How did you respond in real life? Okay. All right, so we'll pull up the video. So the first time that I asked the question, you stated that, well, we just have to exchange insurance information and then we'll send you on your way, correct? Now that sounds like, okay, this is gonna be pretty fast. I can get out of here. I can continue living my life. Now, before we get too deep in this, how do you feel about doing taxes? What about doing laundry? I ask these questions because these are things that are not really fun, correct? You do them because you have to, but they're not really fun, correct? So when a person is involved in a car accident, do you think they're doing something that's fun, that they enjoy to do? Or do you think they're doing something because they have to do it? Okay, so being in a car accident is more along the lines of a person doing something that they have to do, correct? So it's really not something that they want to spend all day doing, correct? I don't want to come from my weekend and say, oh, how was your weekend? Oh man, it was great. I spent 6 hours in a car accident waiting for these police officers to finish their police work. Does that sound like a description of a good weekend to you? If you ask somebody how was your weekend and they responded to you, oh, it was great. I was in a car accident and I had to spend 6 hours waiting for police officers to finish up the paperwork. Does that sound like a good weekend to you? So when someone is in a car accident, it would be reasonable to believe that they're not really enjoying themselves. Would that be correct? Okay. So let's go back to where we were. So the first time that I asked you the question, you said, oh, well, we should just exchange insurance information and you'll be able to go on about your way. Now that sounds positive. That's encouraging. That sounds like a good statement to give, correct? And a person that hears that would likely be calm, correct? And a person that hears that would be understanding, correct? And they would have the proper focus going forward, believing in the words that you said, correct? Now, some moments go by and there's a stall, correct? There's some moments go by and nothing has happened. So then I come back to you and I ask you, hey, do you know how long this is going to take? Now, at this point, the second time that I asked you the question, had you called my ID in? You hadn't. Had you asked me for insurance at that point? You hadn't. Had the other side asked you if I had insurance? They hadn't. Had you called in to see how close your partner was? You hadn't. Did your partner call you and tell you how close he was? He hadn't. So at this point, nothing has happened. Now, is it my responsibility to stay outside with you guys forever? No, it's not. Do I have my own life to live outside of this car accident? Okay, so the second time I asked you, let's see how you responded. So the second time that I asked you, your answer is a little less clear. And your answer is a little less positive. It doesn't sound as assuring now. I don't know, my man. My question is to you is, what are some other responses that you could have said in this moment? Would this have been a good time to say, oh, we're almost there, man. I'm just waiting for my partner to get here. He should be here in 2 to 3 minutes. And then we're going to start filing the paperwork. Would that have been a good response to say in this moment? But did you say that? You didn't. What about let me radio over to the other side. Let me check their status and see what they're doing. Would that have been a good statement to say in this moment? Okay. So now we understand the foundation of the accident, correct? Would it be safe to say that there were things that you could have done that you didn't do. Okay, so there were things that you could have done that you didn't do, and we understand the accident part of this interaction, correct? Okay, so now that we understand that, now we can move on to the next elements. So now, no car accident happens, and then this somehow turns into a search. So then, correct? And then, so as this escalates and now transitions from being a car accident, waiting to do the paperwork for a car accident, because at this moment, I've already given you ID, correct? I've already told you what happened, correct? Technically, the only things that we're waiting on is to exchange insurance, correct? I've already completed 2 of the 3 steps in the accident process, correct? The only thing left that we're waiting for is for you to ask me for insurance so that you can give it to them. So then I would be able to leave as you said in the beginning. That's the first thing that you said, correct? You said, oh, we should just be able to exchange insurance and you should be on your way. That's what you said, correct? So we were only waiting on one final step, and that's for you to ask me if I had insurance. I had already given you 2 of the 3 steps. Is that correct? Okay. So as this escalated from a car accident to now a search, you made body contact, correct? And we talked a little bit earlier about body contact, and we'll come back to it. As it escalates to body contact, I began to ask you questions about the body contact, correct? And then from there, it then escalates into a use of force. So then it turns into a situation from me asking questions about why I need to be searched, and then later I'm tackled to the ground, correct? So after I'm tackled to the ground, then another officer assists you and you guys put me in handcuffs, correct? And when I'm in handcuffs and I'm on the ground, I'm patted and I'm searched, correct? And when I'm patted and searched, you guys find a weapon on me, correct? And what you guys find is a pistol, correct? And the pistol was loaded and it had ammunition, correct? Now that pistol was also on safety, correct? Okay, and to prove that it was on safety, I'll pull that video up real quick. So that right there, that is Officer Blake. Can you name who that officer is? Are those your hands removing the safety from that pistol? They're not. Do you know whose hands those are? Those are Blake Brown's hands, correct? Now, on your police report, you stated that you removed the pistol. Is that correct? So did you remove the pistol or did you not remove the pistol? Did you assist in removing the pistol or did you remove the pistol? Okay, so we'll get into the specific details, but at this point in time, this is Blake Brown with the pistol, correct? And as you can see, Blake Brown appears to be removing the safety, correct? That clicking noise that you hear, that is the safety mechanism on the pistol, correct? Because as you can see, he can't get it fully open until he makes that clicking noise, correct? And after he makes that clicking noise, that's when he's able to fully pull the pistol backwards, correct? That means that's the safety mechanism, correct? Okay, so back to the storyline, the timeline of the arrest. So you guys find a weapon on me, and that weapon is a pistol, correct? And that weapon was on safety. Now, before you pulled that weapon off of me, that weapon was in a pocket, correct? And that weapon was in a pocket that was zipped. And after you guys unzipped my pocket and took my weapon, then you guys stood me up, correct? And then there was a conversation, correct? And I appeared to be complaining about something, correct? Okay, so we'll come back to what I was complaining about. And then eventually I was told what crime I was being charged with, correct? And then I was hauled off to jail, the Grapevine Holding Center, correct? And then we had more conversations at the Grapevine Holding Center, correct? And then I was eventually booked. And then, correct? And then you went on to write your paperwork about what happened, correct? And that pretty much sums up the whole night, correct? Okay. So we talked about the weapon being on safety. We're gonna dive back into there while the topic of the weapon is fresh. So you removed that pocket from a zip pocket, correct? Now, at any other point during that night, did you see that pocket being unzipped? Because it was unzipped when you pulled the weapon out, correct? At any other point, did you see that pocket unzipped? With your own two eyes, did you ever see that pocket unzipped? So my question to you is, if you never saw that pocket unzipped, how did you know there was a weapon in there? Because part of the reason that you did the search is that you said you believed that I was behaving dangerous, correct? But at the time, you did not know I had a weapon, correct? So my question to you is, how did you know the weapon was in the pocket if that pocket had never been unzipped? Now, on your report, you wrote that you had seen your hand in that pocket. Is that correct? Okay, so we're going to go through the footage, and I would like you to point out I would like you to point out the time when you see that hand in that pocket. So we're going to go through the video, and I would like you to holler stop the minute that you see that hand in that pocket. Okay, so we just watched the video, and I don't see anything. I don't see any moment where that hand goes in that coat pocket. But you wrote on your police report that the hand was in that coat pocket, correct? So can you explain why you wrote that statement, and the video shows that that hand never entered that coat pocket? So are you saying that in this moment here, that's when the hand is inside the coat pocket? Is that what you're saying? Okay, so my question now is, at what point did the hand enter the coat pocket? Because to enter a coat pocket, wouldn't your elbow have to raise? Why don't we see any elbows move before the hand goes in that coat pocket? And what about to exit the coat pocket? Wouldn't you have to raise your elbow to remove your hand from a coat pocket? Why do we never see the elbow raised to exit the coat pocket? So when you grabbed me, and we saw the footage of the grab, did you pull my hand out of a coat pocket? Because we know that once you grabbed me, my hands were never free, correct? They were never free. So if you grabbed my hand out of a coat pocket, technically that pocket still would have been open, correct? So why is it that when you grab my hand, the pocket is zipped? So how was my hand inside of a zip pocket? How? Is it possible that you did not see what you claimed that you saw? Is it possible that you wrote something on paper that you did not see with your eyes? Is that possible? Okay, So now that we understand the coat situation, let's examine the body language. Remember earlier when we talked about having a weapon and having a concealed weapon? Remember that conversation? So when you finally made body contact, was I facing you or was my back to you? And at this point, that weapon would have been on my right hip in my right pocket, correct? It would have been on the right side of my body in the right hand coat pocket, correct? So at the angle that you make body contact with me, you can't see my right pocket, can you? And you can't even see the front of my body. So is it possible for you to have seen the weapon that was in my pocket? Unless you're Superman and unless you have X-ray vision, it would have been impossible for you to see that weapon. Is that correct? So that means that when you claimed that my hand was in a pocket on a weapon, you were staring at my back. You didn't even see my weapon, did you? When you claimed that I had a weapon, you couldn't even see the pocket, correct? When you said that my hand came out of a pocket, you said my hand came out of a pocket that you couldn't even see. Is that correct? So by staring at my back, and you stood behind me the entire time, how could you possibly have seen my pocket? And you were standing behind me the entire time. It would have been impossible for you to see the pockets in the front of me when you were standing behind me the entire time. Correct? Okay, so now we understand the pocket issue, and we understand the coat issue, and we understand the weapon. So we understand all of that, so we won't talk about that anymore. So we'll talk briefly about the coat. So part of the reason you believe that I was behaving suspiciously is because I had on a big coat, correct? And in your opinion, having on a big coat on a day that's not cold, that makes somebody suspicious, correct? Now, is it a crime to wear a big coat on a hot day? Okay, but in your opinion, having on a big coat on a hot sunny day makes someone dangerous, correct? So if there was a shopping center and you seen somebody with a big coat on a hot sunny day, you would assume that they're dangerous, correct? Now, if you seen someone with a big coat on a hot sunny day, would you draw your weapon and tell them to get their hands up? Because you believe they would be dangerous, correct? That would be the whole point of protecting your safety. You assume that they're going to be a threat to somebody because they have on a large coat, correct? Okay. So with that information, you believe that because I had on a large coat, that made me suspicious, correct? And because I had on a large coat, that made me somehow dangerous, correct? And what you were saying is that you didn't believe that it was cold enough outside for me to have that large of a coat on, correct? Okay, so the next thing I want to show is the mugshot when you guys photographed me. So in that photograph, can you describe what type of shirt I have on? That appears to be a sweater, correct? So that means that not only did I have on a large coat, I also had on a sweater. And if you can see at the beginning of the clip, I have a towel around my neck. So I have a towel around my neck, I have a coat on, and I have on a sweater. Is that correct? Now, at any point during the arrest, did I appear to be sweating? Were you close enough to me to see if I was sweating? You were pretty close to me, right? At any point did you accuse me of sweating? So you never accused me of sweating, and you were standing close enough to me to see if I was sweating. Now, when it's hot outside, people sweat, correct? Sweat is something that you would notice if someone was sweating, correct? If you said that somebody looks nervous and they're sweating, you would notice that sweat, correct? If it's hot outside and someone's sweating, you would say, oh, it's hot out here. Look, he's sweating. You would notice that, correct? But you never accused me of any sweating. And you never saw any sweat on me. Okay. So we'll look at some other photos. So here's a photo. Do you know who that is in that photo? That's Justin DeBoard. And can you describe to us what type of clothing Justin DeBoard has on? So Justin DeBoard, he has on his long sleeve police shirt, correct? And he has on long sleeve pants, correct? Does this look like something Justin would wear in the middle of summer? Does this look like something that Justin would wear on a hot day? Does this look like something Justin would wear on a warm day? How much would you say Justin weighs? How much weight? How heavy would you say Justin is? You would say Justin's close to 300 pounds, more or less, correct? So are you saying that on a warm day, a 300-pound man would be wearing long sleeve shirt and long sleeve pants? Do you believe this is how a 300-pound man would dress on a warm day? What type of weather would have to exist for a man the size of Justin to dress in this way? Would there have to be cold weather outside for a man like Justin to dress in this way? Okay. So everyone in here has common sense, and I think everybody in here understands how sweating works, and everyone understands how heat works. So I won't ask you too many questions about Justin's clothing. Is that fair? Okay. So we see how Justin's dressed, but let's go on a little more. Okay, so here's Gloria. So Gloria has on like, it's almost like a sweater, like an open sweater. It's definitely not a shirt. It's thicker than a shirt. Would you agree? So it's kind of like a sweater. Do you believe a person would wear something like this on a hot sunny day? What about a warm day? Are you used to seeing people outside on warm days with this type of sweater on? What about her son? You can see her son in the background, Zadiki. Is that how children dress on hot summer days? What about a warm day? What about a day where it's like 70 degrees outside? You know, backyard football weather, golf weather, swimming pool weather. Do you see kids dressed like Zadiki is dressed on a 70-degree day? You see how he got his hood all the way over his head? You think kids dress like that when it's 70 degrees outside? Okay. Let's look at some other people that were there. Look at the firemen. Look at how the firemen are dressed. Those jackets look pretty heavy, don't they? Was there any fire at this car accident? If a fire were to break out, could you explain what a firefighter would likely do? So if a fire breaks out, let's say that the cars were there and there was no fire, and then let's say out of nowhere an explosion occurred, would those firefighters sprint directly in direction of the fire? They wouldn't. What are they most likely to do? they would most likely run back to the truck, correct? And in running back to the truck, they would go back and begin to grab tools, correct? They would likely begin pulling out their water hoses. They would probably start pressing buttons on the fire truck. They would probably start doing things like that, correct? So is it possible that these guys could have taken off their jackets and said that if they need them, they'll come back and put them on? Is that possible? I've never seen a firefighter that immediately goes and dives into a fire. I've never seen it happen. Would you agree? Usually when a fire breaks out, a firefighter is first going to run to his truck. He's going to grab his tools, or he's going to get in a group of other firefighters, and then they're going to discuss some type of strategy, correct? So if a real fire had broken out, there would have been plenty of time for them to put their coats back on if they needed them, correct? But this is not one fireman that you see dressed in these heavy coats. There's 3 of them. Now, when you made the arrest, you were not out at the accident scene the entire night, correct? You were there for a little while, and then you took me back to the jail, correct? However, there were still other police officers at the scene, correct? And so these firefighters, they were at this scene close to an hour, correct? Justin's body camera lasts 42 minutes. That means Justin was on scene for 42 minutes, correct? When Justin arrived, there were no firefighters there, correct? The firefighters arrived maybe 5 minutes after Justin. However, the firefighters stay at the scene until the car is towed. So the firefighters are there somewhere between, let's say somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour, correct? And there's no fire at the scene. But you know what happens between that 30 minutes and an hour? Those firefighters keep those coats on the entire time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up video towards the end of Justin's body camera before it shuts off to show you that towards the end of Justin's body camera, they are still wearing those coats. So I'll pull this up so you can see it. All right, so did you see that? Those firemen are still wearing those coats. Now, do you think on a hot day that you would see, on a hot day, would you see firemen walking around like these firemen are walking? On a hot sunny day, would you see firemen dressed the way that these firemen are dressed for over an hour? For 30 minutes to an hour? Would you see firemen dressed this way for 30 minutes to an hour if it was 70 degrees outside? What type of weather would have to exist for firemen to walk around in this way? It would have to be cold outside for firemen to dress this way and stay dressed that way, correct? Okay, so we'll move on. So here's another fireman. You'll notice that this fireman, he has his hands in his pockets, correct? Now, can you describe what else this fireman has on? Does this fireman have on a short sleeve shirt or a long sleeve shirt? He has on a long sleeve shirt, correct? And he also have on long sleeve pants, correct? Okay. And his hands appear to be in his pockets, correct? Now, did you go, oh, I don't believe you were there. But if you were at the scene and you seen this fireman with his hands in his pockets, because his hands seem to be down by his side, correct? Would you have searched this fireman for weapons? And you say the reason you wouldn't have searched him for weapons, he just appears to be standing there, correct? That fireman doesn't appear to be doing anything wrong. He just appears to be standing there, correct? But you can't really tell because it's a photo. So I'll show you the video of him standing right there. Now, based on his behavior, he appears to just be standing there and his hands are in his pocket and he's minding his own business. If you were a police officer there, would you have searched this fireman for weapons? Okay. So that's a side question. We won't get too sidetracked. But we can agree that would we see a fireman like this on a hot sunny day? Would we see a fireman like this on a day where it's 70 degrees outside? I don't believe we would. What type of weather would have to exist for a fireman to be dressed this way? Okay. So we have a few more. We have a few more because the reason you said that I appeared suspicious is because I had on a large coat, correct? And the reason I had on a large coat is because I told you it was cold outside, correct? And there's even a clip that can be heard where I told you it was cold outside. So I'll play that clip. It's cold outside. Why the fuck you think I got on this big ass coat? So in that clip, I appear to be saying something along the lines of, it's cold out here. Why do you think I have on this big coat? Now, when I said that, did any officer respond, it's not cold out here? Did any officer say that? No, they didn't. So at that point that I said it was cold outside, there was no officer that had anything to say in return, correct? There was no officer arguing with me at that time, correct? Now, at other points during that conversation, were there officers arguing with me? Did Blake Brown ever argue with me with anything that I was saying on that night? Did you ever argue with me about anything I was saying? Okay, we'll come back to that later. We're going to stick with the weather right now. We're going to stick with the coat because you said the coat made me look dangerous and it made me look suspicious. So here is, can you identify who that person is? That's Kurt Kamat. That's the police supervisor, correct? Or he's one of the police supervisors. Can you describe what type of clothing he has on? He has on a long sleeve shirt and a long sleeve pants. So I believe we've had this conversation about Justin. So now we have two police officers outside with long sleeve shirts and long sleeve pants, correct? Now, during Kurt Kamat's conversation with you, because I got this photo off of your body camera, can you describe what Kurt Kamat is currently doing? He has his hands inside of his police vest, correct? Now, in your experience, why do police officers put their hands inside of their vests? Now, that's a good answer for court, but generally, when a police is bored or they're using their vest for posture, they usually have like their hands outside their vest, right? With their elbows out, they have their thumbs out and their fingers, their hands are visible, usually, right? Like I want you to think about suspenders. They usually use their vest like suspenders, correct? You know, when they're bored or they just need something to do with their hands. But his posture in the picture is a little different, correct? He's not using his vest like suspenders. He has his hands inside his vest, correct? And his hands appear to be flat on his chest. Usually when I see police officers with this posture, it's because it's cold outside, correct? Would you agree that Kurt Kamak has his hands in that vest in that manner because he's cold? And would you agree that it appears, does it look like he's trying to warm his hands? Would someone put their hands inside of their vest to keep their hands warm? Have you ever seen that behavior before? Does that behavior look like Kurt Kamak is trying to keep his hands warm? Okay, so now that we've seen other people that were at the scene, I think it's fair to say that it could have possibly been cold out there, correct? How likely does it look like it was how likely does it look like it was hot outside? Not very likely, correct? What about 70 degrees? How likely does it look like it was 70 degrees out there? Just based on how other people are dressed. Does it look like it was possibly 70 degrees out there? Does it look like it was colder than 70 degrees? So is it possible that it was cold outside? Just because you're cold, you're not cold, doesn't mean other people aren't cold, correct? If you're hot, it doesn't mean other people are hot, correct? And if you're cold, it doesn't mean other people are cold, correct? So if you don't think it's cold, that doesn't mean that everybody doesn't think it's cold, correct? And if you think it's hot, that doesn't mean everybody think it's hot, correct? So is it possible that it was cold outside? Okay. And based on how everyone, because you're a police officer, correct? And you're relied on the police department trusts your judgment in order to make great decisions, correct? You have the ability to decide who gets charged with a crime and who doesn't, correct? And you have the ability to decide who goes to jail and who doesn't, correct? Based on, and how much experience as a police officer do you have? Okay, over 11 years experience as a police officer. So based on how the people in these pictures are dressed, how on a scale of 1 to 10, how cold do you think it is outside based on how those people are dressed? On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the coldest and 1 being the hottest, based on the photos that you see, how cold do you think it is outside? And based on the photos that you see, how likely is it that it was cold outside? On a scale of 10, with 10 being the most likely that it was cold out there and 1 being the least likely that it was cold out there, how likely is it that it was cold outside? Okay. And on your police report, you specifically wrote that it was not cold outside, correct? That's what you wrote on your report. So you meant that it was not cold. There's no way it was cold. That's essentially what you were saying, correct? And yet we see all these photos with people with sweaters on and long sleeves and heavy jackets. That's what we see in the photos, correct? But in your paper, you wrote there's no way that it's cold outside, correct? You said it wasn't even cold outside. That's what you wrote, correct? You gave your opinion and you stated it as a fact, correct? But the fact is, in the photos, we see a lot of people with sweaters and jackets and coats and hands in their pockets. We see people with their hands in their pockets and we see people with their hands inside their police vests, correct? Okay, so now that we've addressed the weather, we'll move on to the next thing. So we've talked about the weather, we've talked about the weapon, we've talked about the coat. We've talked a little bit about the Fourth Amendment. So now we're going to specifically get into the arrest. Because now I feel like we understand the basics. I feel like we understand the background. Now we'll get into the arrest. Okay? Sound good? Sound good? All right, perfect. So now, when you began So there's a sidebar. So there's one thing I want to bring up. So there's a moment where I'm standing by the car and I began to move. So when I began to move, was I talking to you? I was talking to you. Okay. And what did I specifically say? Do you remember? I said something along the lines of, I've been in one car accident today. I don't want to get in another. Correct? Do you ever remember me saying that? Okay, great. And in response to what I said, what did you say? You said, I don't want you to be in a car accident. I don't want you to get hit again either. Correct? So at the moment that I moved from the car, you knew why I was moving from that car. Correct? So me moving from that car had nothing to do with that search. Correct? And me moving from that car had nothing to do with that arrest. You knew why I was moving from that car, correct? You watched me the entire time and you saw me move. Is that correct? In your report, did you write down anything about having a problem with me from when I changed positions? Did you write anything about me changing positions in your police report? Did you tell anybody at the scene that when I changed positions, that's what caused you to be insecure? Did you tell anybody at that scene that when I changed position, that's what made you feel unsafe? Did you tell anybody at that scene that when I changed positions, that's when you thought I was dangerous? You didn't. You never brought it up, did you? You never wrote about it, did you? When I asked you about it at the jail, you never even mentioned that moment, did you? So it's almost as if that moment never existed, correct? So this had nothing to do with your decision-making process, correct? So, furthermore, moments before I began to move from the truck, I'm looking in the direction of the sound, correct? If we're going to play the clip. You hear that loud sound in the background? Can you describe what that sound is? That's the engine of a car, correct? That's a pretty loud engine. If you hear an engine that loud, how likely is it that a car is going fast? Pretty likely. If you hear something that loud, that means a car is likely traveling at a fast speed, correct? And you and we were standing right next to the road, correct? Now, when we first walked out there, you told me don't stand next to the road, correct? You said, you don't want me out in the middle of the road. Essentially, what you were saying is you didn't want me next to the road for safety reasons, correct? You didn't want me to possibly get hit by a car, correct? And so you said that you would rather me be further inward in the grass. That's what you said, correct? And so in the beginning, I listened to you. I said, okay, yeah, that makes sense, correct? But I ended up coming back towards the edge of the street because I was coming back to ask you a question, correct? And then after that question, I just ended up staying there. And so I ended up back on the edge of the street anyway, correct? So being close to the street, we both knew that it was possible to be hit by a car, correct? There have been police officers that have been hit by cars that come in traffic, correct? That is not like, have you seen that before, or have you been aware to that before? A police officer that's been hit by a car that's driving by. Have you seen anything like that before? So you know that type of thing is possible, correct? So when you were over there on the shoulder, had you been watching traffic? During the time that we were both standing by the car, did you spend any time watching traffic before I was arrested? You did, correct? So even you were watching the traffic. So you knew that although your police car had its lights flashing, you knew there was still a possibility that a car could possibly come hit your police car, correct? It was still a possibility. It's happened before, correct? So, moments before I move and I change positions, my head is in the direction that cars are driving, correct? And you were also looking in that direction, correct? And you were alternating between watching me and watching the car. So you were watching both at the same time, correct? And so at the time, right before I moved, there were two cars that passed us at a high speed. Do you remember that moment? Okay, so I'll pull it up to you. I'll show it to you on video. All right, so we just watched the video, and so we heard a loud sound, correct? And then we saw two cars zoom by, correct? And so now I want to focus in on your reaction. So I took some still photos. So in the first photo, you appear to be looking in that direction that the large sound came from. And then here's a couple seconds later, then my head turns in that direction. Now you were standing behind me, correct? So at the time that I turned to see where that sound was coming from, you had already looked over there. I hadn't even looked over there yet. You had already looked. So after you looked, then I looked. And then, as we know by the video, you spent some time watching me. So now, correct? So now that we've seen the photos and we see the video, we understand that during that moment, you had been watching the traffic, correct? And you had been watching me, correct? And you were watching both at the same time, correct? So when you seen me move as if I was frightened, or when you seen me change positions, you knew why I was changing positions, correct? Because you had seen those two cars pass by at that high speed. So now, as I'm moving, my hand extends, and you can see my hand on camera. Was there anything in my hands? Okay. So you can see my hand move, and I'm pointing to where I'm about to walk, correct? My hand appears to be pointing at something. And I say, I've been hit one time today. I don't want to get hit today. It's been my unlucky day. And you say, huh? You say, what? Correct? So you didn't quite hear me the first time I said it. And then I said it again. And then you heard me the second time I said it, correct? And what was your response? You said, I don't want you to be hit again either. That's what you said, correct? So when you showed up, you were called out to a car accident, correct? I had already been in one car accident. And here I am, 10 minutes after being in a car accident, and two cars drive past me at a very fast speed, and it looks like I'm about to possibly be involved in a second car accident, correct? And in response to possibly being in two car accidents in less than 10 minutes, I walk forward, correct? And you see this, and you understand the whole thing, so you understand why I move forward, correct? And you never communicated any problem with me moving forward. You never wrote it on a report, correct? You never told anybody at the scene, correct? You never told me about having a problem with me moving, correct? Okay, so now we can leave this moment alone. We no longer have to consider this moment because we know that you did not have any problems with me switching positions. So cool, we can leave that moment alone. So now we can talk about the body contact. So when you make body contact with me, I'm standing completely still, correct? Now you made a statement earlier. You said that part of the reason you did a search is because my hands were going in and out of my pockets. So in this moment that you do the search, are my hands going in and out of my pockets? What about hands in my pockets, period. Are my hands in my pockets? They are, and they were. Now, were they in my pants pockets or my coat pocket? Now, remember we talked about that fireman earlier, and he had his hands in his pockets, and he appeared to just be standing there. Are you saying that right here, I appear to be dangerous? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that I appear to be more dangerous than what the fireman was? Correct? Okay. So can you explain to me what is dangerous about this moment? I appear to just be standing there with my hands in my pocket. Okay, and at this moment, can you tell me what element of crime is currently available? So when you make body contact, do you suspect me of any crime at this point? What about actual crime? Have you seen me commit a crime at this point? Okay. What about possibilities? At this point, do you believe I'm about to commit a crime? Because we heard you call into the radio. Negative. Remember we discussed that part? So you've had plenty of time to observe me. I'm just standing there. Did you believe me about to commit a crime at this point? Okay. Well, there's only one other possibility, correct? We already looked at Terry versus Ohio. In Terry versus Ohio, it said that you can't make body contact unless you suspect somebody of a crime, correct? Okay, so what about dangerous? In what way am I behaving dangerous in this manner? So let me ask you a question. If I'm chewing bubble gum and an officer says, whoa, you chewing that bubble gum in a dangerous way, I need to search you. Technically, the officer said I was doing something dangerous, correct? Does that mean the officer's opinion was correct? So in this moment, you said that I was behaving dangerous. Does that look like dangerous behavior? Is your opinion correct in this situation? Okay, so at this point, there was no crime committed, correct? And you didn't believe I would commit a crime, correct? And there was no reports of crime in the area, correct? At this point, I did not fit the description of a suspect, correct? And I was not under investigation, correct? And I was not behaving in a dangerous way, correct? I was behaving in a way that you observed, you watched me the entire time, correct? And you understood what I was doing the entire time, correct? And you communicated with me as I was doing it, correct? And you understood I had been in a car accident in less than 10 minutes ago, correct? So you knew exactly what I was doing, correct? So let me give you an example of how similar, of something this is similar to. Let's say I give you an ID, correct? And then you turn to me and say, where is your ID? And I say, I gave it to you. And you say, no, you didn't give it to me. Does it make sense to then say, nah, he didn't have ID. I'm going to write him up for not having ID. Does that make sense when I gave you ID? So if I behaved in a way and you watched me do it the entire time and you didn't behave like I was behaving in a dangerous way, to then say I was behaving dangerous, that doesn't make any sense, correct? Okay, so I don't think I'm gonna present it like that. I don't like the angle that's pushing me down, because it seems like they're gonna let him get away with that, even though he didn't say I was behaving dangerous. He felt that I was being dangerous, but he has to explain himself. You know what I'm saying? You can't just do it without explaining yourself. But I don't even want to give him no opening, so I might just glaze over that, because I feel strange every time I bring it up. So I think I'm gonna just glaze over. I ain't gonna talk for him or provide no help for him. They gotta fight their own point, and then if he try to bring it up, then I'll get him for trying to bring it up. All right. So in this moment, I appear to just be standing there, correct? Can you explain to me how this behavior was dangerous? Because we've already talked about that my hand was never in a coat pocket, and my hand was never on a weapon, and my hand was never in the same pocket as a weapon. So here I appear to be standing perfectly still with my hands in both of my pants pockets, and I'm waiting to exchange insurance information. Can you tell me how this behavior appears to be dangerous? Okay, and let's say you do believe my behavior was dangerous. What did you believe would occur? Did you believe I was about to harm you in this moment? What about harm someone else? Did you believe I was about to harm someone else? Because technically, you have to suspect a crime, correct? You have to suspect that I'm about to engage in a crime. So, what did you expect I would do? There's only two possible outcomes. You expect I was about to harm someone else, or I was about to harm you. Does it look like I was about to harm someone? So is it possible in this situation you simply made a bad decision? Now, let's talk about the decision that you made. Because you chose to do a search, correct? To a person that was standing perfectly still, correct? Now, how many hours of sleep did you have before you came to work on that day? You had 2 hours of sleep. Does that sound like the right amount of sleep a person should have before going to work? If you were about to fly on a plane and the pilot got on the speaker and said, attention everyone, I've only been asleep for 2 hours today, but there's nothing to be afraid of. We're going to get to our destination as planned. Does that sound like a pilot that you want to fly with? What about a doctor? What if a doctor was about to do surgery, was about to give you a new heart or give you a new kidney, and right before doing the surgery, the doctor told you, oh, I only been asleep for 2 hours today, but don't worry about it. I'm going to get you that new kidney. You're going to be good as new. Does that sound like a doctor that you want to go to? So here we are in a situation with a police officer that's only had 2 hours of sleep. And this police officer has the ability to decide if someone goes to jail or if they don't go to jail. Does that sound like a good position to be in with a police officer? In your opinion, does that sound like a good person for a person? Does that sound like a good position for a person to be in with a police officer? Do you think the public should be forced to interact with police officers that have only had 2 hours of sleep? So do you think it's safe for the public to be interacting with police officers with 2 hours of sleep? So do you think you made a good decision by choosing to come to work with only 2 hours of sleep? Is it possible that you should have possibly called in on this day? Should you have used your personal time off instead of coming into work on this day? Now, does your department have a minimum sleep requirement for your department? Are you expected to sleep a certain amount of hours every day before you come to work? Now, you're an adult male, correct? And you're somewhere between 30 and 50. You don't have to give your exact age, but you're between the ages of 30 and 60, correct? So you've lived enough that you know how it feels to be sleepy, correct? Can you describe to the court, how do you behave when you feel sleepy? And can you describe to the court, how do you feel when you've had a good night of sleep? And can you describe to the court how your body responds on low sleep? Okay, so let's talk about people outside of you for a second. How would in your experience, how do people on low sleep behave? If you seen somebody that had a low amount of sleep, how would you expect them to behave? If you seen somebody with low sleep, could you identify their behavior? Would you be able to determine, oh, it looks like he hasn't been asleep that long? Would you be able to identify that? And what behaviors would you expect to see? So do you believe that only sleeping 2 hours had something to do with the performance you had during the night of my arrest? Do you believe you only sleeping 2 hours had something to do with the decisions that you made? Do you believe it's possible that it affected your decision making? On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it that having 2 hours of sleep affected your decision making? I want you to think a little bit about our economy. We all get products into our warehouses from the trucking industry, correct? Now, if a truck driver only had 2 hours of sleep before driving from New York all the way to Texas, do you think that would be a safe road for people to be driving on? If all the drivers in our country, all the truck drivers in our country were only sleeping 2 hours a day, do you think the roads that we drive on would be safe? So are you saying that it's acceptable for a police officer to sleep 2 hours a day, but it's not acceptable for a truck driver to sleep 2 hours a day? Okay. Okay, so now we have, that's a good ass point. So now we have the sleep ideas out of the way. We successfully addressed the sleep ideas in this case, and we'll move on to some other parts of the case, correct? That cool with you? Okay, so we've addressed the sleep, we've addressed the body contact. So now let's talk about the actual arrest. Now, during the arrest, I was asking you, had I broken any laws, correct? Up until that point, had I broken any laws? In your words, had I broken any laws? So your knowledge, you're at this point, you know that I have not broken any laws, correct? And when you were there in person, at that point, did you believe I had broken any laws? Okay, so you believe that in some way I had broken a law. Did you communicate that to anybody? Did you communicate that in your report? Did you communicate that to me? Did you communicate that to other police officers? Okay, well, what actions did you take? And if that's what you believe, what about my communication patterns? Did my communication patterns match the behavior that you accuse me of? So let me give you an example. If you tell somebody, hey, there were some reports that you have a huge hunting knife on you. That sounds like somebody. Now, I don't know the laws about having hunting knives, but that sounds like somebody might possibly be dangerous. So you have the right to search them, correct? Let's say having a huge hunting knife is illegal, and somebody reports that somebody has a hunting knife on them. So that would mean that they're possibly engaged in a crime, correct? So let's say you go over there and you search them. You're searching for the hunting knife, correct? And let's say you search them and you don't find the hunting knife. Say, no, there's no hunting knife on you. That should be the end of the search, correct? That should be the end of the matter, correct? Once you find out that the person is not guilty of what you believe them to be guilty of, that should be the end of the event, correct? So the event should follow along the script, something like, oh, sorry, I thought you had a hunting knife, but you don't have a hunting knife. You're free to go, correct? That should be about how that conversation goes, correct? Now, what if the conversation took this turn? Well, you don't have a hunting knife, but I need to go a little deeper. I need to search your car, and I need to make sure you don't have drugs, and then yeah, I need to go on your bank account, and I need to review all your financial statements. I need to make sure you're not money laundering. Does it sound like that's the path that investigation should go? Can you then use the hunting knife to then start doing all these other police investigations? The answer to that question would be no, correct? So in this case, if you suspected me of DWI, and then after interacting with me, it's clear that I have not done DWI, I should be then free to go, correct? Is that how that interaction went? No, it did not. After that interaction, you guys tried to find a reason to put me in handcuffs, correct? So at first, there was no reason to put me in handcuffs, but then you guys tried to find a reason to put me in handcuffs. Is that correct? Okay. So, in that interaction, before I was tackled, you gave a command and you told me to lie face down. So I was asking questions about what law I broke, and you couldn't provide an answer, correct? You kept saying things like nothing, just relax, correct? So I hadn't broken a law then. What about currently today, looking at the body cam? Do you believe I broke a law? So you didn't think I broke a law then, and you don't think I broke a law now. Okay, cool. I hadn't broken any laws. So we're going back and forth, and then you begin to become more aggressive, and you become less conversational. Correct? You're not interested in talking about what laws have been broken or not broken. Correct? You're only interested in performing your search at this point. Correct? You told somebody at the scene that I tensed up, correct? That's what you said. And you said at that point, I pretty much knew he had something on him, correct? Now, when you say the word, you knew I had something on me, you didn't really know, correct? You were assuming that I had something on me, correct? At that point, you hadn't touched a weapon, had you? And you hadn't saw the weapon, had you? You were only guessing that I had a weapon, correct? The fact that I didn't want to be searched, you said that was super weird, correct? All right, so we'll play that back. All right, and here's the clip where you tell somebody that I tensed up, and you said that when I said I didn't want to be searched, that's when you knew that you pretty much knew that I had something on me. Now, I want to ask you a question about something. You said that when you asked to search me, that's when I freaked out. Correct? You described my behavior as freaking out. So, the only way I can compare what you're saying is to compare it to something. So you're an adult male, correct? So I want you to imagine that you're standing straight up. And we can assume that you're a police officer. If somebody came up to you while you were in your police uniform and grabbed your arm, how would you respond? Would you immediately respond with violence? So what about as a citizen? If you were standing as a citizen and somebody walked up to you and grabbed your arm, if you didn't have on a police uniform and nobody knew you were a police officer, and somebody walked up to you in a grocery store and grabbed your arm, how would you respond? So in your police uniform, you would immediately respond with violence. Would you consider that freaking out? Okay. As a citizen, how would you respond? Would you raise your voice or would you talk calmly? Would you say, hey, excuse me, sir, why are you grabbing my arm? Is that how you would turn around to being grabbed by somebody that you don't know? Or would you be like, hey, man, what's your problem? So if you were to raise your voice, would that be considered freaking out? Okay. Let's say that a person came up to you and they grabbed your butt. Then what would you do? As a police officer, if somebody walked up on you and grabbed your butt, what would be your response? And what if you were a citizen and they walked up to you and they grabbed your butt in the grocery store and you look back and it was a male looking right at you? What would you do? What would be your response? Now, would that be freaking out? So what you're telling me is that a police officer grabs me and my response is, wait, hold on, bro. Why you gotta search me? Your response is that's considered, hold on. Let's look at what I did. So my response to you grabbing my arms was, hold on, bro. Why you gotta search me? And you wrote in your report that that's freaking out. You told somebody else that's freaking out. That doesn't sound like a freak out to me. So are you saying that I have no right to question why somebody is grabbing me? That if I ask a question on why I'm being grabbed, I have to be considered as freaking out? Can I not just have a question about why someone is grabbing me? So you saw the way that I responded, correct? Is it possible to respond in any calmer of a way? Is it possible for a person to be more calm than how I responded in this situation? In this situation, I turned around and said, hold on, bro. Why you gotta search me? I said it in a conversational tone, right? Is it possible for a person to be more calm than what I was? That looks pretty calm, correct? So why is it that you told other people that I was freaking out? That doesn't look like I was freaking out. So is it possible that you are exaggerating what you're writing in your report? You're making what I'm doing seem more evil or more dramatic than what it actually is. All I did was say, hold on, bro. Why you gotta search me? Does that sound like I was freaking out? Okay. So there's the body contact. So there was conversation to try to understand why the body contact was occurred. Correct? And I started out very conversational, correct? And then I began to become a little more agitated as to why you were trying to search me, correct? Now, was my agitation, in your opinion, was it unprovoked? I began to raise my voice, correct? Now, did I raise my voice unprovoked? When you were interacting with me during that night, had I risen my voice at you at any point before that point tonight? I didn't. So I only raised my voice after you began touching me, correct? Now, in the moment I began raising my voice, were you ever pulling on me? So what you're saying is I was calm until the point that you began touching me, correct? And then when you began to pull on me, that's when I began raising my voice, correct? So if you had never pulled on my arm, I would have never raised my voice at you. That's fair to say, correct? So let me give you an example. You remember being a kid, right? You know how some kids will play and they'll be like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. Have you ever seen that game that kids play? I'm not touching you. I'm not. So to get a kid to stop, do you think a kid will stop playing that game if you're like, stop, leave me alone. Stop, leave me alone. And you say that. If you say that 25 times in a row, do you think that kid will leave you alone? Now, if you tell that kid, stop touching me. Now, if you raise your voice and you use emphasis to get your point across, if you say what you're trying to say strongly, do you think that kid will stop touching you? Yeah, they will. That'll be the end of the game. They've sensed that your emotion has changed. So in this situation, I was talking to you calm, correctly? And we were able to have a conversation about what was occurring. Now, what changed that event? That event changed when you began to pull on me. When you began to pull on me, then I became upset. Now my voice raises because I'm letting you know that I need to know why you are pulling on me. You are pulling on me and you have not given me an answer why you're pulling on me. And if you're not going to give me an answer, I'm willing to raise my voice at you. Now, is it illegal for me to raise my voice at you? It's not. So I began raising my voice at you because you were pulling on me. Do you have the legal right to pull on me? You don't. To pull on me, there has to be some element of crime, correct? So I began to raise my voice and I said, no, you need to tell me why you are trying to search me. So we're going back and forth in the conversation, correct? You're pulling on me and you say I tensed up. Now we're going to talk about this tensing idea, because this is the reason that I'm supposed to be getting charged with a crime. They're saying that when I tensed up, that's when I committed the crime against you, correct? Even though you grabbed me unlawfully, they're saying I committed a crime when I tensed up. When I responded to you, that's when I committed the crime, correct? So what they're saying is, although you baited me into a illegal, or what you believe to be illegal, although you started it, they're saying that I committed a crime when I responded to you, correct? Okay. So after you touched me, they say you said that I tensed up. Now, can you describe the tensing motion? So in the video, did you ever describe the tensing motion like Hulk Hogan or something like that? In the video, I saw you like flex your arms like Hulk Hogan would do. Is that kind of how the tensing motion went? Can you describe that tensing motion? So what you're saying is that I was using force through my arms to stop you from putting my arms behind my back. Is that what you're saying? So when you said I was tensing up, can you describe what your goals were? What were you trying to achieve? What were you trying to do when you said that I was tensing up? What if I were not tensing up? What would you have done? What were you trying to do? Were you going to put my hands behind my back? Okay. So after my hands were behind my back, what were you going to do? Were you just going to begin searching me, or were you going to put me in handcuffs? What was the plan? Okay, so you had a plan Did you ever announce your plan to me? Did you ever say to me that I'm detaining you? I'm going to put you in handcuffs so I can search you. Did you ever tell me that I was detained? You didn't. Did you ever say that you're now under arrest? Did you ever say that to me? You didn't. Did you ever say that I'm going to put you in handcuffs and search you? I'm now about to put handcuffs on you and search you. Did you ever say that to me? No. But you did threaten to tackle me to the ground, though, correct? You did threaten to tackle me. You said I'm going to be on the ground, correct? But you never told me if I was detained, correct? And you never told me if I was under arrest, correct? Okay. So technically, legally, at this point, I was not detained. And technically, legally, at this point, I was not under arrest. Okay, so I was neither. The only thing you kept saying is relax your arm. And during that, you're alleging that my arms were tense. Okay, so was I standing straight up or was I leaning away from you? Now, was there ever a moment where you said, so that's why you were pulling away from me? Did you ever make that statement? Okay, so we're going to pull up some video. So here in the first statement is the pulling away. So it seems like you said, is that why you were pulling away from me, my man? That's what you just said, correct? So when you made that statement, you were aware that I had been leaning away from you, correct? Okay. But you just told the court that you did not make a statement like that, correct? Okay. So we have that part considered. Now, let's look at the video. So in the video, you reach for your radio one time, correct? Okay. And there it is a second time. You reach for the radio a second time, correct? Now, I want you to notice the voice, the sound of your voice. Do you sound like you're fearing for your life? Can you describe the sound of your voice right now? You sound pretty calm, correct? What about the visual? Do you currently look like you're in danger? You don't look like you're in danger and you don't sound like you're in danger. Have you heard that saying before? If it walks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it sounds like a duck, it quacks like a duck. Have you heard that saying before? So here we're looking at video. You don't look like you're in danger. You don't sound like you're in danger. So let's look at how some of the other police officers were responding when they showed up. So let's look at Blake Brown here when he gets out of his truck. Now you see how lazily Blake Brown got out the truck? Does Blake Brown look like it's an emergency right now? He doesn't think it's an emergency. Because Blake Brown, you've called for help, right? And Blake Brown is responding to the sound of your voice in that call for help. So you see the way that Blake Brown gets out the car. Does Blake Brown look like you're possibly in danger? Does Blake Brown look like he's going to have to show up and draw his weapon? Nah. Blake Brown gets out the car like, oh man, only 2 hours of work left. Can you describe Blake Brown's body language when he gets out of that truck? Does it look like he's responding to help save an officer's life? Okay. And let's look at some comments that Kurt Kamak says. Kurt Kamak says he thought you guys were just talking. All right. And then Kurt Kamak says that he lazily got out the truck because he thought you guys were talking. So he admits it twice. But let's look at Kurt Kamak's behavior. All right. So we can agree that not only what I say it looked and sounded like you didn't feel threatened and you were in no danger. But the video of the police officers around you, they're also saying that it looked like you were not in any danger. So can you explain why everyone around you say that they sense no danger, but you appear to be the only one that's escalating? Can you explain that? Can you explain why you are the only one that believed that that situation needed to be violent? Nobody else around you thought that there was any danger. Okay. But let's get back to the tensing of the arms. So you said the arms were tense. So we're going to use an example to evaluate this. So you said that I was tensing my arms to prevent you from bending my arms, correct? That's what you said. Now, before we talk about the tensed arms, we saw the video, we can clearly see that I'm leaning over. Would it be easier for you to put my hands behind my back if I was standing straight up or if I was leaning away from you? Is it possible that my leaning is what prevented you from putting my arms behind my back? Okay, so if I'm leaning away from you, am I technically using force against you? If you're here and I'm doing this, did I touch you in any way? I didn't, did I? Did I yank away from you? Was there any violent, exaggerated motions? There wasn't. So even if I did lean away from you, would you describe that as a violent lean away from you? Or would you describe that as a gentle lean away from you? Does the type of lean that I'm doing from you, will that cause you any type of physical injury? If I yanked away from you, could that possibly injure you? But the type of lean that you see in this video, would that cause you any type of bodily injury? Okay. So now let's get to the tensed arms. So you said that my arms were tensed, and that's why you couldn't put them behind my back. Now, let's consider a ball of water. Because you were pulling on my arms, correct? And that's how you knew that my arms were tense, because you were pulling on my arms, correct? You wouldn't know if my arms were tense if you didn't pull them, correct? So you were pulling on my arms. So let's explain that with a ball of water. So if you pull on this bottle of water, that water is going to go in your direction. And that means that if I also have my hand on the same bottle of water and I'm pulling on the bottle of water, that means you couldn't pull that bottle of water not easily, correct? That means if we're both pulling on the bottle of water is going to be in the middle. And that means that if I let go of the bottle of water, your arm is going to yank backwards. Correct? And the same thing with you. If I'm holding the bottle of water and I'm pulling, like you said, I'm using force, my arms are tense. The only way that I can hold that bottle of water and stop you from grabbing it, because you're trying to grab my arm, and you said that I was stopping you from grabbing my arm by using force. That's what you said, right? So if I'm stopping you from grabbing this water by using force, that means when you let that bottle of water go, my arm should jerk backwards because I was using force the whole time. The only thing that held my arm in place is because you were also using force. We were using the same amount of force. That's what you're saying, right? So that means that when you take your hand off that bottle of water, the only one using force on that bottle of water is me. So that means my arm should jerk backwards, correct? Now, in this video, do you ever see my arm jerk backwards? Now, in this video, you let go of my arm twice, correct? and you reach for that radio twice, correct? And when you reach for that radio, my arm doesn't move, does it? My arm didn't jerk when you reach for that radio. So how was my arm using force when the minute that you let my arm go, my arm never moves? So how was my arm using force if that arm never moves? That's a good question to ask, correct? Okay, so now that we've discussed the force, and we know that it would be impossible for an arm to use force against another arm, we see you grab for that radio, and both times that you grab for that radio, that arm never moves. It never moves, not one time. Okay, so now that we understand the arm and we understand the force, now we can talk about the takedown. Now, before I was tackled to the ground, you gave a statement and you said, lay face down on the ground, please. That's what you said, correct? Now, at the time that you gave that statement, you had both of your arms on both of my arms, correct? So can you explain to the court how somebody is supposed to get face down on the ground if you're holding both of their arms? So the only way a person could get face down on the ground if you're holding both of their arms is to take a knee, correct? The only way they can do that is they first have to take a knee, correct? So the night that you arrested me, did I ever take a knee? And so you first have to take a knee to get on your face, correct? That's what you asked me to do. Lay face down on the ground. So as we can see, as you look at the video, there goes the knee. I take a knee. And so after I take this knee, what am I most likely to do next? It would be to get face down on the ground, as you asked me, correct? But as I take a knee, can you describe how you reacted after I began to take the knee? You pulled me right back up from the ground and then you slammed me to the ground, correct? So in the video, you asked me to take a knee. You asked me to get on my face. And then I began to take a knee to then get on my face, and you stopped me from getting on my face, correct? So in your opinion, how many seconds does it take for somebody to go from standing to laying on their face with both arms behind the back? How long does that take, in your opinion? Okay, so now we understand the moments leading to the takedown. We understand that you told me to get face down on the ground. And I asked 2 times, can we talk to your officer? Does asking to talk to your officer change the command of get down, face down on the ground? Does that change? So I want to put this an example of someone robbing a bank. If someone came out the bank after robbing the bank, you would most likely say, get your hands in the air, correct? So you tell somebody to get their hands in the air. And what are you likely to ask them to do next? You would say, get face down on the ground, correct? So after they hear the command of saying, get face down on the ground, let's say they say, I want to talk to your supervisor. And you say, get face down on the ground. And you say, I want to talk to your supervisor. And then they begin to take a knee and get face down on the ground. Did anything change? Okay, let's go through this example again. let's say they got their hands up and you say, get face down on the ground. And they say, I want to talk to your supervisor. And you say, relax or you're going to be on the ground. And they say, I want to talk to your supervisor. And you say, relax or you're going to be on the ground. And then they begin to take a knee and then they get face down on the ground. Has anything changed? So we see that both times that the person asks, can we talk to another person? It doesn't change the command of get face down on the ground. That command has not changed, correct? So when you say get face down on the ground, and I say, can we talk to your officer, please? And you say, relax or you're going to be on the ground. And I say, can we talk to your officer? And you say, relax or you're going to be on the ground. And then I finally begin to take the knee to get face down on the ground. That command has not changed. You still said, get face down on the ground. And that's exactly what I went to do. I went to get face down on the ground, correct? Now, when I attempted to get face down on the ground, did you let me get face down on the ground? So do you know how much time passed between when you said get face down on the ground and when I was tackled? Are you saying that I only had 5 seconds to make that decision on if I should get face down on the ground? Are you saying there was a time limit of 10 seconds or less for me to make that decision? So let me ask you a question. When Blake Brown was not there, it was acceptable for me to get face down on the ground, correct? Now, when Blake Brown appeared, why was it no longer acceptable to get face down on the ground? Was it also acceptable to get face down on the ground when a second officer was there? Can you tell me why the request to get face down on the ground was no longer important once the second officer was there? Was it your plan to be violent the entire time once the second officer appeared? Was that your plan the entire time? So let me ask you this. Was it possible to handle that situation in a non-violent way? Were you okay with being non-violent when it was just one officer? So, can you explain why there was a problem with being non-violent with 2 officers? Can you explain why that was such a big problem that you were unwilling to be non-violent with 2 officers? So is it fair to say that once there were 2 officers, you were 100% confident that now the situation could be handled violently? Okay. So now we understand the moments before I was tackled to the ground. Now we can talk about when I was on the ground. Did I ever resist when I was on the ground? Did you ever tell anyone I resisted when I was on the ground? Did Blake Brown ever say anything about me resisting on the ground? Did you ever write anything in your report about me resisting on the ground? Okay, so I never resisted on the ground. So you guys put me in handcuffs, you stand me up. We already talked about you taking the weapon off of me. Now there was an incident where I was leaning against the car. Correct? Now, before we get into this incident, there was a pattern that was happening throughout the night, and I would like to get your opinion on that pattern. Is that okay? So there was a question that I kept asking you that night, and I could not get that answer. I could not get that question answered, correct? So I'm going to ask you the question. That question was, in what way am I being super weird? Do you ever remember me asking you that question? And were you able to provide me with an answer? Okay, so let's look at the first time I asked that question. So the first time I asked that question, you said nothing, just relax. Okay. So you said that you were searching me because I was being super weird. And I asked you directly, in what way am I being weird? And you couldn't answer it the first time I asked you. Okay, let's see if there's a second time that I asked you. So here I am. I'm on the ground and you guys are searching me. And you say that you're searching me for weapons. Cool, no problem with that. The law gives you the ability to search me for weapons. But then I say, why are you searching me for weapons? And you say, because you're acting weird. And here comes that magical question. I ask you, in what way am I being weird? And when I ask you this question, let's see how you respond. Do you remember how you responded? Okay, let's see how you responded. There it is again. For a second time, you don't have an answer to how I'm being weird, correct? Now, when I asked you why I was arrested, you said because I was being weird, correct? And I've asked you 2 times, in what way was I being weird, correct? I asked you once before I was in handcuffs how I'm being weird, and you couldn't answer the question then. And then I asked you after I was in handcuffs, how am I being weird? And you couldn't answer the question then. So let's see if I asked you a third time. So there it is. I asked you the question a third time. And did you answer the question? No, you didn't answer the question. For a third time, you avoided the question. Correct? But there's something special about the third time that you avoided the question. Would you agree? Because after the third time I asked you the question, I began to complain about police abuse. Correct? After the third time I asked you the question, I began to complain about police violence. Correct? Were you abusing me at this moment on video? Were you using police violence against me during this moment on the video? During this moment, wasn't I handcuffed? I was in handcuffs, correct? And during this moment, you're holding my hand, correct? Can you explain what you were doing with my hand? Was there any reason that you should have been touching my hand? Was I of any threat to you at this point in time? Was I of any threat to any police officer at this time? So you said that I turned around. Did I turn around aggressively? Were we engaged in conversation before I turned around? Could you have simply just pushed my shoulder and that been the end of it? Were you forced to hold my hand? Do you remember for how long you were holding my hand? Did I complain about you holding my hand? Do you know how I described you holding my hand? Did I say something about a judo grip? You remember that? And when you heard the words judo grip, how did you respond? Do you remember? Okay, let's play the video clip. You described the judo grip as, what is that, a Ric Flair move? That's what you said, correct? Can you describe who Ric Flair is? Ric Flair is a professional wrestler, correct? And in wrestling, they use violence, correct? Now, it may be scripted violence. It may be like a play. Everybody already knows what moves they're gonna do, but it's still violence, correct? If Ric Flair picks a man up and slams a man to the ground, that's still a slam to the ground, correct? Although it's wrestling, that's still a real slam to the ground, correct? If Ric Flair gets on top of the ropes and jumps on somebody with an elbow, he still elbowed somebody, correct? That's still violence. So when you said, what is that? Some type of Ric Flair move? That's just like saying, what is that? Some type of wrestling move? That would be the same way to ask that type of question, correct? So let's do some role play. Let's go back, because in my complaint, I said, he has my hand in some type of judo grip. And you said, what is that? Some type of Ric Flair move? Correct? That's what you said. So let's go back through, let's role play, and let's see what that conversation sounds like if I replace the words Ric Flair judo grip with the words violent wrestling move. So let's see what that sounds like. He got my hands in some type of violent wrestling move. Does that sound like what I was trying to describe? Did it sound like I was trying to describe some type of violent move? And in response to me complaining about some type of violent move, how did you respond? Did you ever say something like, you don't like holding my hand? Did you ever say that? Okay, let's play it. There it is, clear as day. You just said, what, you don't like holding my hand? You just said that, correct? But when I asked you the question, you told the court that you didn't say that. So can you explain why you say you didn't say it, but on the video, we can see that you just said it? Can you explain what the difference is and why you're changing your answer now? And let's talk about the nature of that comment. Does that sound like something a police officer should be saying to an arrested person, in your opinion? Should you be saying something like, you don't like holding my hand? Does that sound like something you should be saying? Now, in this moment that you're making that comment, how would you describe your emotions? Were you happy in this moment? What about angry? Were you angry in this moment? What about disinterested? Were you disinterested in this moment? In your own words, how would you describe your emotions? What about focused? Were you focused in this moment? Was doing your job the only thing you were focused on in this moment? So making a comment like, you don't like holding my hand, does that sound like you were focused on your job? Is that how they train you in T-Code? To ask these type of questions to people that are handcuffed? You don't like holding my hand? That's how T-Code trained you? So if I email this clip to T-Code, the people at T-Code are going to approve of this behavior, correct? They're going to say that you were trained exactly the way that they trained you, correct? This is the type of question that they wanted you to learn how to ask, correct? They wanted you to hold people's hands and then ask them if they like their hands being held, correct? They specifically hired you to hold the hands of 36-year-old men. That's why they hired you, correct? Okay. So I was complaining about a violent wrestling move, and your response to me complaining about a violent wrestling move was, you don't like holding my hand, correct? So, but let's not forget the complaint. Remember that this complaint come after you asked me for ID. No. That this complaint come after you guys tackled me to the ground. No, I didn't complain after you guys tackled me to the ground. I didn't complain right there at the scene. I complained later after I was taken to the jail. But at the accident site, did I complain about being tackled to the ground? Well, I said some things about, yeah, anybody would be upset about getting tackled. But I did not complain about being, well, we can say I complained about tackle. I complained about it. Yeah, I complained about it. Okay. But the thing that's interesting about this is that it comes after I asked that magic question, correct? The third time that I ask you, in what way am I being weird? That's when the violent wrestling move occurs. Correct? So that means for the third time, you were unable to answer that question. Correct? You said that you did the search because I was behaving super weird. Correct? But for the third time, you have been unable to answer this question. Correct? One time I asked you, I did not have handcuffs on, and you didn't answer the question. The other 2 times I asked you, I was arrested and I had on handcuffs. Correct? And you were still unable to answer the question. Correct? But the special thing about this third time is that you knew that you couldn't answer the question, and to avoid answering the question for a third time, you chose to use violence to try to escape the question. Is that correct? So are you saying you did not use violence in order to create a distraction? Is that what you're saying? Okay. All right. So that's the moment in question that we're talking about, where I complained, and I believe that pretty much wraps up the police interaction. From here, we go on to have a conversation in the jail. Correct? And I'll show you what that conversation looks like. Now, in this conversation, I'm asking you a question, correct? And I appear to sound calm, correct? And at this point, I'm the one that's been arrested. I'm the one that's been in a car accident. And I'm the one that's been slammed to the ground, correct? And I'm also the one that has complained about being slammed to the ground, correct? And I'm the one that's complained about having my hand violently bent, correct? So I'm the one that's had a lot of negative things happen. So it seems like I should be the one that would be upset, correct? But yet in this video, I sound calm, correct? But let's listen to you and your voice. Now, in your opinion, do you sound calm? What about emotional? Do you appear emotional in this video? What about upset? Do you appear upset? What about angry? Do you sound angry in this video? So is it possible that you made some of your decisions that you made because you were angry with me? Is it possible that I never broke the law, but the only reason you chose to put me in handcuffs is because you were angry? During my arrest, did you ever tell me to shut my mouth? Okay, let's take a look at that video. And in this arrest, did you ever call me by a name that is not on my ID card? All right, so the video shows that you called me Dum Dum. When I gave you my ID card, did it have the name Dum Dum anywhere on that ID card? So my name is not Dum Dum, correct? But you did call me Dum Dum. So you called me Dum Dum. You told me to shut up. Here's a snapshot of you after telling me to shut up. And you look kind of angry. How would you describe your appearance in this video? This is a picture I took of you after you told me to shut my mouth. How would you describe your appearance? Do you look happy after telling me to shut my mouth? What about focused? Do you look focused after telling me to shut my mouth? What about angry? Do you look angry after telling me to shut my mouth? So you've told me to shut my mouth. You've called me Dum Dum. We have a photo of you right here. And I don't know what word you would use to describe, but we have this photo of you after you told me to shut my mouth. There was alleged police violence. I complained about alleged police violence against you, correct? You were confronted with questions that you were unable to answer, correct? And here you are on video and you appear argumentative, correct? And you sound emotional, correct? Is it possible that you only took me to jail because you were angry at me? Is it possible that I never broke any laws and the only reason you took me to jail is because you were upset? Is it against the law for me to make you upset? Is it a crime if I make you mad? Is it a crime if I make you angry? Is it a crime if I ask you questions that you don't like? And would it be wrong for you to take somebody to jail that didn't break a law? And would it be wrong for you to take somebody to jail only because they made you mad? Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness.